Hi, I'm David Domoney. I'm a chartered horticulturalist and a great lover of plants. Popular and a favourite of mine. Tall, striking plant that you can grow in the UK is the lovely ornamental allium, with its spectacular spherical blooms producing a lovely feature in garden borders. And being such a favourite plant, I've searched Google to find the most asked questions about alliums and how you can grow your own successfully. This is my border here, and at every border that I've had in different houses, I've had these alliums. They really herald in the peak of spring into summer. They're absolutely gorgeous. First question from Google is, where are alliums native to? And that's very interesting, because alliums are a plant that is predominantly native to temperate and subtropical regions of the Northern Hemisphere. But according to the experts at Kew, they're also native to South Africa too. They have been introduced into parts of South America, Africa, India, Australia and New Zealand. Now, another very popular question is, are alliums perennial? Well, yes, they are. They're plants that grow from bulbs, which will return to brighten up your garden. And they can last an individual bulb for several years, but of course they are producing younger bulbs as well, so once you've got them in the garden, they'll continue to grow. Which garden style is alliums best for? Well, alliums are great in several garden styles, from chocolate box cottage garden styles to simple prairie style displays. Iris and Nepeta, otherwise known as catmint, will flower roughly the same time as the alliums to give you a real big wow in your borders. How do you grow alliums from seed? Well, of course, most alliums are bought in bulb, but of course you can produce them from seed as well. You collect the seed once you've dried the flower heads when it's finished flowering. For the greatest chance of success, it's best to sow the seed as soon as possible after ripening. The seeds of the species Allium will usually be identical or similar to the parent plant, but seeds collected from hybrids won't be true to the parent plant. You'll just get something different. But most gardeners will choose to grow them from bulbs, and again, they're available from flower shows or garden centres, and you can plant the bulbs in mid-autumn. Alliums can be grown in containers or in borders, and they like free draining soil like most bulbs. And when you plant the bulbs, you'll need to plant them at a depth which is approximately 4 times the diameter of the bulb. If you've selected a smaller variety, then you can plant them 7.5 to 10 centimetres apart, and for taller species you need to leave around about 20 centimetres in between each bulb. Should you plant your alliums in a container, then choose a deep pot. And you can use a mix of peat-free John Innes No. 3 compost, and you can add a little bit of grit in there to help the drainage really. And before you wonder who John Innes is, he was a 19th century philanthropist who donated his fortune for the improvement of horticulture. There are 3 John Innes mixes of compost, and each one does a slightly different job. Number 1 is for young plants and cuttings. Number 2 is for potting on plants and vegetables. And number 3 is for mature plants grown in pots and containers like shrubs and conifers and trees and other perennials. How long do alliums take to germinate? When you grow it from seed, it takes around 12 weeks to germinate, but then it does take several years for them to reach maturity to start to flower. How do you grow alliums, and are they easy to grow? Well, yes. Plant your alliums in a sheltered spot with well-drained soil, and of course a sunny position as well. Here's a good tip. When you're planting a bulb, think of a bulb like a light bulb, okay? Because when you put a light bulb in, you push and twist, bayonet fitting or screw fitting, you just push and twist. And the same with the flower bulbs, push and a twist. So the base of the bulb hits the base of the hole. That way there's no gap underneath the base of the bulb and the hole for water to get in and rot. So just firm them in, just push them in like that, light bulb, flower bulb. Plant them out in October or November, and they should start to flower in May and June. Let the allium foliage die down naturally so the energy goes back into the bulb itself. And don't be tempted to cut off those leaves before they've died down, because they do produce food for the bulb and charge it up for the next season. I recommend having some low growing plants surrounding the alliums at the base. It disguises the foliage, which can look a little bit scrappy as they start to die down. I will keep the flower heads as long as you can. They turn a bronze colour, and this adds interest in the border over winter. Of course, you can let them dry out and take them inside as decorative pieces. I've done that before. Now, there are many different ways to take them. You can cut them at the base. I normally just give them a bit of a pull and they come straight out. And now that was real. It looked fake, but that's just about it. As you can see where it's joined the bulb at the base, it leaves a little heel, but you take it out in its entirety. And the secret is to put it into a sheltered position in the garage or back of the greenhouse. I usually hang them upside down and tie them all together. And I've also sprayed them up and used them as displays with gold and red and silver for Christmas. If you use spray, you can spray them up. I've done some of them silver, some of them gold. By the way, if you are using spray, please make sure you're wearing gloves. Also a mask as well, in a well ventilated area, and all the other safety things that go with that. But I think they make marvellous decorations. On the tree at the front, I've not put too many decorations because I want you to actually see the plants that I'm talking about. I've got some little starbursts of allium heads there as baubles. How big do alliums grow? Well, taller varieties of allium, such as Allium giganticum, very well named, and Summer drummer, can reach heights of up to 1.82 metres. That's 6 foot tall. With smaller varieties like Allium molly, Allium neapolitanum and Allium roseum grandiflorum, great names there, they grow about 30 centimetres tall. Now, how long do alliums flower for? All being well, you should enjoy about 3 weeks of flowering from your alliums. And when I say you enjoy, it's the bees as well. Though as the flowers fade, they will retain their ball-like shape, which makes them really striking attraction into the border, even though they're not bright purple anymore and they're sort of turning copper. Are alliums good for bees? Well, just as I've just said, they love them. Bees, bumblebees, butterflies, they all love alliums. They provide a great food source for pollinators. The rich shades of purple are ideal for bees as they can see this colour extremely well. Are alliums frost hardy? Well, yes, alliums are hardy and cope with temperatures as low as -10 degrees Celsius. That's because they're all tucked up in the bulb underneath the soil. Just check the variety before planting. Some require a little bit of mulch in the area to help the bulb retain warmth in the soil. What colours do alliums come in? Alliums are available in quite a range of colours, blues, and whites and yellows, gorgeous pinks as well. But the most popular alliums are the purple varieties, such as Purple Sensation. And they are a joy to behold, they really are. The cornflower shades of blue presented by Allium ceruleum is a smaller globe, but it's so lovely to see. You can also get yellow alliums as well, such as Molly with their tall star-shaped flowers. I'm going to try and get some of them in here this autumn. There are many white options too. One example being Allium White Empress, which works well with any scheme for a dedicated romantic feel. Pink alliums range from pale to rich pink, and Allium Pink Jewel is a wonderful example of rosy ball-like shapes. When do alliums flower? Alliums planted in October will give the longest flowering time. You'll see your alliums bloom between late spring and early summer, the flowers lasting 2 to 4 weeks, depending of course on the variety. This makes them a wonderful choice for garden colour in the intervals between the seasons. Do alliums flower in the first year? Well, if you bought decent sized bulbs and get them in, they're already charged with a flower and they'll give you a spectacular colour. Buy them smaller, sometimes you have to wait a year for the bulb to charge itself up. Do alliums need a lot of water? Well, alliums are drought tolerant and very resilient. If your alliums are in the ground, regular watering is necessary. Of course, when they're blooming, that's when they need the energy. But be mindful of watering your alliums because you don't, like all bulbs, they don't like sitting in wet conditions. Those alliums grown within containers need, of course, a bit more watering because it's not in the ground. You're the curator of that container. So make sure that you've got good drainage in the pot and you water regularly, especially when it's in dry seasons. Do alliums need staking? Well, alliums offer surprisingly strong stems to hold up these big lollipop heads. However, they may need staking if you're in an area that's got strong winds, you're slightly exposed. And if you are growing the very tall varieties, you might need a little bit of support, but see how you get on with them in the location that you plant them. Do alliums need deadheading? Deadheading, once the flowers have faded, prevents your allium going to seed. I prefer to leave them in the border because I think the dried heads of them look pretty spectacular too. And as I mentioned earlier on, they're great to make interior decorations, especially at Christmas, or even use them in a wildlife or bug hotel because they're also pretty good for habitats too. So deadheading offers no benefit to the plant, but if you do deadhead the allium, then use a pair of clean, sharp secateurs. Do alliums need feeding? Well, of course they do, because you're charging that bulb up again for the following year. Apply feed in the early spring when they're very active, or as the plant is starting to die down at the end of its growing season, so you're charging the bulb. You can add a granular all-purpose fertilizer in, which effectively is taken up slowly over a period of time, or you can use liquid feed again. You can also apply eggshell feed using crushed eggshells and water. Steep the eggshells in a bucket of water or a watering can, and it'll charge calcium into the water, which is essential for bulb development. But it's always best to use a proper bulb fertilizer.
Now the key thing is, if you're using eggshells, is to make sure you properly dry them out. Put them in the oven for 7-10 minutes, depending on how hot your oven is, to make sure the whole inner membrane really has completely dried out. And then you can use this as compound fertilizer, which means as solid, crushed into your compost while you're using it, and also as liquid food as well in a watering can. Now, the magic here is to put as many eggshells as you can into the can, and a really good tip here is to use these little nets. Sometimes you get them with oranges, and this one's particularly is with lemons, and you then just drop it literally into the watering can and leave it to soak for about 10 days. I usually mix it up a bit when I'm in the greenhouse as well, because it is creating your own fertilizer as such. And now obviously ericaceous plants like rhododendrons, camellias, heathers and the like aren't always that keen on too much calcium, but here's the method of doing it. You can let it soak in there, mix it round, then take the bag back out and use it as a liquid form of feeding as you're watering as such. Or you can also powder it like this. You just sort of like blend it up, and as you dig a hole to put in a couple of plants, you don't need a huge amount, you just need an element. It's taken up by the roots of the plant, and then as you take your pot off and mix it in and plant it in, it just gives that extra amount of food.
If you want to apply a liquid fertilizer, you can do that. It's very good, fast action, and is absorbed very quickly into the bulb. And don't forget that mulching and regular watering, especially when flowering, is a very good feeding routine. Do alliums change colour? No. If you're looking for flowers that can change colour, I'd recommend hydrangeas, of course. These are shrubs known for their ability to change colour based on the type of soil it's grown in. Acidic soil will give you blue flowers and alkaline soil will give you pink ones. But alliums themselves keep true to the colour that they start in. Will alliums flower twice? Well, these lollipop flowers only flower once, but as perennials they will reappear the following year. Sometimes if they produce babies at the bulb, you may get 2 or 3 quite close by, but they would be individual flowers that are growing and developing. What do you plant with alliums? So much of a choice. Plant alongside perennials like echinacea. That'll help hide some of the foliage as it's dying back in autumn. Peonies are another statement plant, which is perfect for your alliums to use. And especially with some peonies, if your alliums are going through it, it gives them a bit more of a support in an exposed area. Euphorbias, salvias, verbascum also add interest. What have I got here? I've got some delphiniums in the background here. I've got some lupins growing up, some hollyhocks growing up. You know, effectively, they merge really well and add a little bit of height into a mixed border. What not to plant near alliums? As a member of the onion family, although not edible, It's best not to plant alliums amongst peas and beans and asparagus, and there's a reason why you should not do this. For legumes, as peas and beans, the natural antibacterial properties of the alliums will stop the nitrogen fixating bacteria that the peas and beans need to grow, so do not plant them in there. As well, alliums grow underground. They can disturb the shallow roots of asparagus crowns, making it challenging for them to grow, so keep them clear of that. It's always best in ornamental borders. When do you plant your alliums? Autumn, of course. It's the same time as you plant things like daffodils and tulips and hyacinths and crocus. Early to mid-autumn is recommended, but the optimum time is October. And anything later only affects the blooming time, resulting in a slightly shorter period and sometimes slightly shorter length flower stalks, so get them in earlier. Do alliums multiply? Yes, alliums naturally multiply. You can find that it produces small bulbules at the base, and of course they can self-seed as well. When can I move alliums? Well, wait for the foliage to completely die back, as they produce the energy that's charging up the bulb for next year's growth. So leave the foliage on as long as you can. In late autumn and early spring, you can lift the bulbs and replant them immediately to the same depth in a new location. What do you do with alliums and offsets when moving? Well, these are young bulbs that attach themselves to the mother bulb. It's the way it reproduces itself, and when moving the alliums you can detach these little offset baby bulbs and plant them directly into their final position or into pots to grow on. These offsets develop into flowering bulbs a lot quicker than if you were to produce them from seed. Do alliums make great cut flowers? Yes, they make excellent cut flowers thanks to their very stiff stems and being very long lasting. The secret is to immerse them in water as soon as you make the cut. Change the water frequently. It's best to do that with cut flowers. And cut the stems by 3 centimetres every water change. And that helps them keep fresh. And of course, putting in a little bit of florist liquid food too will guarantee success. Purple Sensation is a really good option for cut flowers, and why not create a cut flower border so you can then just crop your flowers and bring them in fresh inside the home. When do alliums stop flowering? Well, most alliums finish flowering early summer, so create a border that will offer a successional flowering period by adding things like echinacea to flower from June and agapanthus to offer their showy flowers in June, July and August. What time of year do you collect allium seeds? Well, of course, collect the seed heads as they dry. You'll see little black seeds that are left, and if you shake them into a paper bag, they all fall straight down, and it's easier for you to collect them. You can use a Tic Tac box, the empty one of course, eat your Tic Tacs first, just to use the empty container to store your seeds. And if you leave it too late, the wind will blow all the seeds away anyway. When do alliums die off or die back? Late summer, after flowering. The energy starts to charge and go back into the bulb in the ground. Now this very unique way allows them to store food and carry it over, especially during the winter and of course into early spring before it comes back up into flower when the environmental conditions are favourable for the plant. When do you cut down alliums? Well, cut them back when the stalk and the flower head is completely brown and dry, if you don't want to have the look of the dried spheres, which can look quite nice in the garden. When all the greenery's gone and it's just brown, that's the time to clear the surface of the soil. When do alliums start to grow back? Well, you can expect your alliums to re-emerge and erupt from the bulb in springtime, with flowering starting with many varieties in May. Will alliums spread? Well, not really, because they're bulbs, they naturalise rather than the word spread. So it's not like a root system going out, they're producing other little bulblets as they go. So you end up with quite a nice cluster. What are the problems with alliums and how do I fix them? Ornamental alliums are really relatively problem-free. There are a few challenges that do affect the onion family. But if you keep the ornamental and the edible plants apart, this negates most of this from happening. but there are a few things to keep a lookout for. First up, onion fly. Now they look like a grey housefly, but it's the maggots of this insect that do most of the damage as they eat the roots. If this happens, you may see yellowing leaves or the plant will fall altogether. Another one is onion white rot. It's a fungal disease which impacts again on the bulb. Yellowing, wilting leaves are the first signs above ground, but check the bulb below the ground for confirmation of this fungus, which will cause white fluffy fungal growth around the base. Dispose of the bulbs in the green waste bin and not your compost heap. You don't want it spreading, and avoid planting any alliums in the infected area, as the damaging fungus spores may still be in the soil, and sometimes it can last for up to 15 years in the soil. Downy mildew is another one. Now this occurs during mild humid weather. Yellow, brown or pale green blotches will appear on the leaves, which will look like mould on the underside. You may also find that the leaves will wilt and die from the tip downwards. To reduce the risk of this, avoid planting too close together and divide congested clumps. Make sure that the plants in the area that you are growing have a good airflow, and keep on top of the division so they don't become too compacted, and don't water too much. You can also remove and dispose the affected leaves, but do not again put them in the compost pile. Get rid of them completely. Allium leaf miner. Both the insect and the offspring cause damage to alliums. The female fly will puncture and feed from the leaves, leaving very distinctive lines of white dots on the foliage, whilst the larvae tunnel into the leaves and stems and the bulbs. You may see the allium display distorted or twisted leaves, and the insects themselves are very small, only about 3 millimeter in size. Why are my alliums drooping? Well, that's a funny question. This could be related to underwatering. Despite alliums being drought tolerant, they do need a lot of water, especially when they're producing a great deal of flower colour, but also in dry spells as well. Certainly in pots and containers, so make sure you give good level of watering to your plants, but make sure that they're not waterlogged. My rule is if the soil is moist, then no need to water them. You can just apply a balanced fertiliser in at the early stages of growth. You can do this as a liquid fertiliser to help the plants grow. Alliums also need sunlight as well, so if it's in a great deal of shade, that does cause problem. Move them into a brightly lit position afterwards. Why do my alliums have yellow tipped leaves is a big question. It could be an indication of a variety of different things. It could be, of course, that it's dried out. Certainly if it's yellowing before the flowers have occurred. If it's yellowing after the flowers have occurred, it could be just part of a natural process. So the plant takes so much energy to produce these giant big flowers. You know, usually the leaves do go a bit of a yellow at the base. At Chelsea Flower Show, a lot of the designers plant other plants around the outside to hide these untidy leaves. It is a natural part of the plant. Of course, it could be an indication of disease problems, as I mentioned earlier. The secret is making sure there's a readily supply of water, and you can add a little bit of liquid feed in as well to help the nitrogen. Are alliums poisonous to humans? They aren't generally toxic to humans, but as an ornamental bulb, they're not grown with the intention of eating, so I would suggest you avoid doing so. Are alliums poisonous to pets? Unfortunately, the chemicals within alliums are toxic to cats and dogs. So if your pet likes digging the garden and eating your plants, it's not one to add in. Thanks for watching. Alliums are so effective when added into your garden borders and displays, adding a lovely pop of colour. I do like mine, and look, there's some of my honeybees from the hives over at the back just tucking in. It really makes gardening worthwhile. They're so beautiful and so important to the wildlife in the garden. Please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more great content like this. And remember, please switch on your notifications so I can let you know of some great fun videos for gardening, plants, flowers, and grow your own that may be coming up.